Mike Evans is reportedly set to hit free agency. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Tuesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at @JYarcho_Bucs. Your credentialed member of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, just general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Head to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. On this episode of Locked On Bucs, we are talking about the recent report of Mike Evans and the Bucs still being far apart on negotiations, and that Mike Evans is likely to hit free agency barring any big change. So let's start with that report. Jordan Schultz of Bleacher Report tweeted out on Monday that the Bucs and Mike Evans remain far apart on contract talks, and that the Bucs, by not getting a deal done on Monday, have $7.4 million in dead money being added to their cap for 2024. Schultz also said that talks will continue, but his understanding is that barring an unexpected change in discussions, Evans will hit the open market. Now, Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times said that he's not sure how far apart they are, or even that any serious talks have restarted, and that's kind of the way that I lean. Now, Schultz is pretty solid on his reporting. Like many, he gets a few wrong every now and again, but his source telling him that the Bucs and Evans are still fall apart could mean a few different things. So first off, it could mean that there really haven't been any discussions since the talks broke off last year. So both sides are still kind of where they already were, which was far apart. So, that report would be 100% true, but would also mean that there wasn't really a whole lot that has changed over the course of the last few months. Second, it could mean that there were brief conversations and that both sides have a number, and it's going to take some work to get those numbers somewhere in the middle to an agreeable mark. And third, it could mean that both sides have been working and can't seem to find a middle ground that works for both parties involved, which to me is kind of the worst case scenario. And then finally, and this pertains mostly to the last part of the report that says he's likely to hit the open market, it means that they've engaged in some level of talks, and the Bucs understand that he's looking for a certain value, and they're willing to let him see if the market matches that value before offering him more than what they already have in mind, which is a risky move for sure, because you run that chance that you don't even get to make that matching or counter offer, and he does leave the Bucs for another team. As of now, I'm leaning towards the first scenario, which is that both sides really haven't engaged in any true hard negotiations since they broke off talks, and that the status of Evans' tenure is still where it's been since those talks were cut off before the season. The dead money is what it is. They aren't going to worry about it, and Jason Licht and Mike Greenberg probably factored that in when making their off-season plans, and they know how to legally maneuver the cap, and that 7.4 in dead money will be negligible when all is said and done. Now, the contract, even though it's in his age 31 season when it begins, is probably going to run more than his last one. So when Mike Evans re-signed with the Bucs in 2018, it was a 5-year, $82.5 million deal. So that's $16.5 million per year on average. This time around, Evans is going to cost north of $20 million, probably closer to $25 million per year. And it may not be a 5-year deal, but it may cost that $82.5 million for a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal, which is going to obviously increase the cap hit, increase his average annual value. And the Bucs are going to have to work around that a little bit. But that's the difference between signing in 2018 when the cap was what it was versus 2024 when the cap has continuously gone up each and every year. So an initial hit on any deal isn't going to be as bad in 2025 or 2026 as it is in 2024 because that cap number is going to keep going up. Now, according to Over the Cap, the Bucs are now down to $32 million in cap space. You have Mike Evans, Levante David, Baker Mayfield, Greg Gaines, Antoine Winfield Jr., Matt Filer, and Jose Ramirez all accounting for $21.9 million in dead cap. And I've talked on this show a couple of times about how the Bucs can move on from some guys and clear up some cap space. And of course, there are restructures that they can do to free up cap space with guys like Vita Vea, Jamel Dean. You still have Ryan Jensen on the books, and all signs really point to his career being over. So there's some wiggle room there that the Bucs can manipulate and create some cap space. So the Bucs can go from 32 to about 65 to 70 million in cap space relatively quickly. It just depends on how they want to maneuver those contracts and manipulate the cap and be able to free up that kind of money. And it just takes the finessing of Greenberg to be able to get all those ducks in a row and make it happen, which we know he can because he's done it time and time again. That's how the Brady years happened. That's how the championship happened, was that manipulation that Greenberg is so good at doing. It's certainly not panic time for Bucs fans as it relates to Mike Evans. But I go back to one of my episodes last week, I believe it was Tuesday's episode, where I talked about how this may be boiling down to more of a respect thing than an actual dollar amount. And I wonder if we're going to see that play out a little more. If Mike Evans feels slighted by the Bucs, he may not be willing to take a matching offer or a late offer because he'll feel that the team should have valued him in that way from the very beginning because no one knows him better than they do, which, if you really think about it, is kind of a double-edged sword at times, right? When free agency falls around, there's a lot of reasons that big-time players hit the market, and sometimes the team that he played for just flat out cannot afford to bring him back because of their situation. But sometimes they know the player and are willing to let him go to the highest bidder because they know that that bid is a mistake. They know what their value of him is, the value that he brings to the team, and they're not willing to pass that because they do know him so well. Now, I don't think that's the case for Mike Evans, but I think it will be for Devin White, much like it was for Quan Alexander a few years ago. But this is a team that drafted Evans. They signed him to a huge deal in 2018. He won a championship with them. It's the only team he's ever known, but that's where the feelings of disrespect may come into play because the Bucs shouldn't have let other teams flirt with him if they truly wanted him back to begin with. So taking a look at all of that, I am going to look at some of the teams that are likely to flirt with Mike Evans if he ends up hitting the open market. That is next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You all know that I used Game Time to get incredible seats to see the Lightning play in Columbus. I surprised my son with tickets to go see the Celtics and Pacers in Indianapolis for his birthday, and I used them again to take my son to see the Celtics play again in Cleveland in just 2 weeks. The biggest draw for me, outside of the flash deals that I love taking advantage of, is the view from my seat feature, so I know exactly what to expect when we get to the arena. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of an event and even an hour after it starts. It is the place to find last-minute seats, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you're coming back tomorrow for a WTSP Wednesday. I'll be joined by Evan Klosky, and we will have plenty to discuss. But in the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So in this world where Mike Evans hits free agency and teams start calling, which teams would be the ones ringing his phone? And I went through and I took a look at a lot of these teams, and I had a few criteria for a team to want to make this move. First, they need to feel like a receiver like Evans is one of or the last piece to take them over the top and make them a championship contender. Second, they have to have the money and are an up-and-coming team that feels that they can contend in the next 3 to 4 years. Third, they're a team with a lot of money that desperately needs to make a big splash and get fans excited. And I'm sure a lot of you listeners remember those Buccaneers teams that did exactly that, that had a lot of money, went out and got a big player to make a big splash, and then it didn't really work. You look back at Deshaun Goldson and Darrelle Revis and Vincent Jackson to an extent, because he was fantastic, but the teams that he played on absolutely stunk. So looking at those options, here are the teams that I think would be interested in Evans and can afford a $20 to $25 million receiver. And first up is the Washington Commanders. They have the most cap space in the NFL with over $70 million. New ownership, new coaching staff, and Dan Quinn knows Mike Evans as well as just about anybody from having faced him all those years as the Falcons head coach. And they're looking to kickstart some excitement in the area. They're likely going to have Caleb Williams or Drake May as their quarterback. So you bring in Evans to team up with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and you have an electric trio of players to help out a rookie quarterback. However, I do think that that would be the place of all the teams on this list where Evans' streak of 1,000 yards a season would go to die. Number 2 is the Tennessee Titans. Again, new staff and a head coach that just came from a system that had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now, obviously, I think because of that, T. Higgins would be their number one choice to bring in as a wide receiver 1, but they have over $65 million in cap space and haven't had a legit number 1 receiver since trading A.J. Brown away to the Philadelphia Eagles. And before that, I really can't think of a legitimate number 1 receiver they had since like Kevin Dyson. So you're also dealing with a young quarterback entering his second season, but he's already learning his second offense in as many years. They want someone reliable like Evans to give Will Levis some confidence. Number 3, I have the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is more of that first category where the Bengals are a championship contender. And if they lose T. Higgins, they could be looking for someone to line up opposite of Jamar Chase. Evans and Chase would immediately be the best wide receiver duo in the National Football League. And I don't think Joe Burrow is going to have a problem feeding Evans the ball enough to get him his 1,000 yards. That would be a huge get for the Bengals. Again, Like the Titans, I think T. Higgins would be their number one choice. But if T. Higgins moves on, I could see the Bengals pursuing Mike Evans. Number 4 is the Houston Texans. You have the offensive rookie of the year at quarterback. You have a phenomenal head coach and a team that just won a playoff game in a season that no one expected them to do anything with that rookie quarterback and that rookie head coach combo, like that tandem. Well, you add to that, it's close to home for Mike Evans, and they have $54 million in cap space and could throw a lot of money towards Mike Evans and then add him into an offense with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. If that happens, the AFC South is theirs for the taking. Number 5, my third AFC South team on this list, the Indianapolis Colts. Their own number 1 receiver, Michael Pittman Jr., may be hitting the market and leaving. So calling up Mike Evans to be Anthony Richardson's number 1 guy would be a really easy transition for them. They have $59 million in cap space and would immediately make Mike Evans the focal point of their offense as Richardson returns from his injury. So that move also makes them a contender in the AFC South, as long as they also spend some of that money and some of their draft capital on much needed help on the defensive side of the ball. Number 6, I have to bring it up. I'm not doing my job if I don't bring it up, but it's the Carolina Panthers. Not much explanation needed here. Dave Canales loves Mike Evans and can pitch to him that it's the same offense he was just in that led to one of his best seasons of his career. The Panthers have $26 million in cap space as of right now. I didn't do a deep dive into how they could free up more space, but again, it would probably be pretty simple to do. And then they have a young quarterback in Bryce Young who is in desperate need of help. They did not have a wide receiver 1 last year. They barely had a borderline wide receiver 2 on that roster. Bringing in Mike Evans to give Bryce Young that legit number 1 guy, then you beef up the offensive line a little bit. It's a long shot, but Canales, if given the opportunity, is going to make that phone call. Number 7, and I think outside of Buccaneers fandom, this would be the move that would make just football fans the most excited. It's the Detroit Lions. With almost $45 million in cap space and coming off an NFC championship game, the Lions could add Evans opposite of Amon-Ra St. Brown and take their offense up to another level. That might even be enough to make them the top offense in the NFC. Between Evans, St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, plus you have the speed in Josh Reynolds and Jamison Williams. That's an offense that I would not want to game plan for at all. That makes them every bit as dangerous as the San Francisco 49ers offense that can beat you with 5 different players on any given week. You have Ben Johnson returning as offensive coordinator, so they have that consistency there in Detroit. They are going to be a force next year. They are going to be in contention. Mike Evans might be that piece that takes them up one level that they do need. And then finally, this is kind of my super long shot, but it's interesting to think about, and it's the Baltimore Ravens. And I call them the longest shot because they would have to do some salary cap gymnastics to create the space. They only have about $5 million in cap space, but Baltimore is constantly in the championship contender conversation. Their quarterback just won his 2nd MVP award, and they might be the worst team in the NFL at drafting wide receivers. You give a 2-time MVP quarterback, a future Hall of Famer to throw the ball to, and that might be enough to get Baltimore over the hump. I'm not sure if Evans would like playing in the cold and the snow, but there's a lot of receivers out there that would love to play with Lamar Jackson, and that's the biggest weakness the Ravens have and have had over the last few years. Just absolutely terrible draft picks at receiver, leaving Lamar Jackson with no reliable weapons. Now, with all of that, and I put those in no particular order, so don't think that like I power ranked these. These were just the 8 teams that really jumped out to me and made a lot of sense for them to be interested in Mike Evans and then potentially Mike Evans to be interested in them. But with all of that said, it's not time to panic. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, futures bets, and more. Right now, the Boston Celtics are favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 260, while the defending champion Denver Nuggets are the favorites out of the Western Conference at plus 440. And FanDuel already has odds up for Super Bowl 59. The San Francisco 49ers are the favorites at plus 500. The defending champion Kansas City Chiefs are sitting at plus 650 for a potential three-peat. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are tied with the New Orleans Saints, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Seattle Seahawks at plus 7,500. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Wrapping things up here on a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And here's where we are. They didn't hit the soft deadline and prevent the $7+ million in dead money from happening. No big deal. There haven't been any updates on negotiations or talks outside of the two sides still being quote unquote far apart. Again, no big deal. Here's what it boils down to. Trust the job that Jason Licht and his staff are doing. No one inside of that building wants Mike Evans wearing any uniform other than one of the Buccaneers. No one in that building is saying, yeah, let Mike go. He's not that important. It's not that big of a deal. We can replace him. No one is saying that, and nobody wants that to happen. Trust me. At this point, Jason Licht and Mike Greenberg can continue to crunch numbers and shuffle things, move them around to figure out how to bring back all these guys that they want. Mike Evans being at the top of the list. There are still 2 weeks before free agency begins, and that's more than enough time to get this stuff ironed out. Even if it hits the open negotiating window, agreements are not official until they are signed once the new league year begins. So you're going to get flooded with tweets and texts and breaking news notifications that so-and-so and this team have agreed to this deal, and so-and-so and this team have agreed to this deal, and this guy is going to be the highest paid player at this position thanks to this team. It's going to happen. But you have to remember that there is still time during that negotiating window for teams to come in and make other offers. The Bucs would still have time if it's reported that Mike Evans is being offered a 4-year, $100 million deal by the Detroit Lions. The Bucs can still come in and say, look, we can give you this. We need you to stay with us. And he can change his mind. We have seen players where it's announced that they've come to an agreement on a deal with the team, and then they backed out and they've signed with a different team once the new league year has begun. And I know I just went through all of those teams and I named all of these reasons why those teams would want Mike Evans, why Mike Evans would want those teams. And I believe, that all ended up adding up to about a quarter of the league. But that's because that's the kind of player he is. And I believe that at least a quarter of the league, if not more, should be interested in Mike Evans or would be interested in Mike Evans. The Bucs know that too. They will do everything in their power to get him back. And if they can't, it won't be for lack of trying. Don't forget one thing, and I think this gets lost a lot of times in the emotion of fans when it comes to these signings and these negotiations. It takes two to tango. It takes both sides to get a deal done. And we see it every year where this player gets signed for this amount of money and fans are up in arms. Well, the Bucs could have done that. The Bucs could have signed him. Maybe he didn't want to play for the Bucs. Maybe the Bucs didn't want him. It takes two interested parties to make these things work. And if Mike Evans wants to leave, there's nothing that the Buccaneers or Jason Licht or Todd Bowles or anyone inside that building is going to be able to do to change that. So in the event that Evans does leave, that doesn't mean that Jason Licht should be fired or that the Bucs are the bad guys. It just meant that it didn't work out. Again, no one in that building wants Mike Evans to go and play for another team. But there is a business side to this game. And there's a business side for the franchise, and there's a business side for the player. The franchise is going to do what they feel is best for the team and gives them the best chance at winning a Super Bowl. The player is going to do what's in the best interest of him. Whether that means getting the most money he can while he still can, whether that means getting as much money as he can while also pursuing a Super Bowl. You know, a player that wants to win a Super Bowl ring is going to sign with the Detroit Lions or the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills or the San Francisco 49ers for less money than they would be offered by the Chicago Bears or the Carolina Panthers or the Arizona Cardinals, because those teams are terrible. And to some players, money isn't everything. They want to be at the top of the mountain in their profession. They want to reach the pinnacle of their sport. And yes, Mike Evans has already done that. But the players that have done that have said that it made them want to do it again even more. So sometimes the business side of a franchise and the business side of a player don't line up. They don't match up, and things just don't work out. I still believe that Evans and Mayfield are priorities 1A and 1B. And Light is going to find a way to get this done. We're still 2 weeks out. So the report of this soft deadline not being met does not mean slam the panic button, freak out, and think that Mike Evans is a goner. It's still possible. It's still in the realm of reality that Mike Evans does sign with a different team. But that Monday deadline and him, likely to hit free agency does not mean that it's done and he's gone. You just have to trust that, like they've done time and time again over the last 10 years, Jason Licht is going to get this figured out, and Mike Greenberg is going to make the money work to ensure that the greatest offensive player in franchise history and probably a top 3 player in franchise history is going to stay with the franchise. There's plenty of time to get this worked out. There's plenty of time to figure out the financial aspect. But just remember, if it doesn't get done, it doesn't mean that the Bucs didn't try. It doesn't mean that Jason Licht didn't try. It doesn't mean that they didn't want it to happen. It just meant when they got to the finish line, something didn't work, and they both decided to go their separate ways. It happens. Jerry Rice played for like 4 teams or 5 teams by the time his career was said and done. Adrian Peterson was the same way. Brett Favre, Peyton Manning. You have some of the all-time greatest players in history end up playing for different teams than they started with, teams that didn't build their Hall of Fame resume, and it is what it is. But I still believe Mike Evans will end up being a Tampa Bay Buccaneer in 2024 and beyond. Just give it time. Trust in the front office. Follow the light. And believe that both sides want this to happen. With that, I am going to get out of here. Please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.